from our CFO.
And from Woon Kong. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Oh my gosh.
Mr. Worcester
is in a tie and everything.
Is our keynote speaker for today. For the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2009, pension plans across the country experienced significant investment losses, and that included SD SERS. For the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2009, the market value of SD SERS investment portfolio was down about 19%. To mitigate the resulting significant increase in annual required contributions, other public pension plans have either made changes or are considering changes to the calculation of their annual required contribution to mitigate the impacts of this really anomaly in the financial markets. At the July 17th, 2009 SD SERS board meeting, Chiron, which is the SD SERS actuary, provided a presentation showing that the expected annual required contributions for the port, for the city, and for the airport. And they showed what those contributions would be expected or projected out from 2011 through 2015. Based on last year's investment losses, the annual required contributions for all three plan sponsors are expected to increase starting next fiscal year and running through fiscal 2015. The Chiron presentation also included a range of options to mitigate those increases in the annual required contributions. While no action was taken at the July SD SERS board meeting, Chiron did advise the SD SERS board that they needed to have a decision by SD SERS no later than October. So accordingly, at the September 18th board meeting of SD SERS this month, the SD SERS board is quite possibly going to be making a decision relative to the options, if they want to adopt any of those options that were provided by the SD SERS actuary. In advance of that September 18th meeting, what SD SERS has asked is all three of the plan sponsors to provide any recommendations that they would like to provide, if any, to the SD SERS board so they can take that into consideration in terms of their direction to the SD SERS actuary. So today, what we're seeking from you are any recommendations that you would like to make to the SD SERS board concerning the calculation of the port's annual required contribution. And to assist you in making that decision, I have asked Woon Kong, the port's actuary from the Sunland Group, to provide the board with a presentation that includes the recommendations, his recommendations, for any changes based on the options that were provided by the SD SERS actuary to the SD SERS board. So at this point, I will turn the podium over to Kong and let him give you his presentation.
Welcome, Kong.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair Cushman. I see you're rubbing your hands. You have something for me.
Absolutely.
And Commissioners and Commissioner Hall, hello again and goodbye again. So as Jeff mentioned, the extraordinary poor investment in results in the last couple of years will significantly increase the port's pension contributions for the next several years. And Sunland was asked to review the alternatives presented by Chiron and make recommendations on which of these alternatives the port should support. And I want to clarify, emphasize that, Sunland is neutral on whether the port should select any of these alternatives, because in our opinion, the issue of mitigating future contributions really depends on each organization's situations. For example, if the non-mitigation of these additional contributions is going to jeopardize the objectives and mission of your organization, then I think you should give serious consideration to these alternatives. On the other hand, if you decided that it's much more appropriate to fund using the current approach, to continue current approach, then it is your decision to do so. Here are the projected contributions calculated by Chiron, and I emphasize that they have not reviewed, we have not audited these calculations other than look at them for reasonableness. One of the things that have not been reflected in these Chiron calculations is the implementation of the hybrid plan for non-SWAN employees. And my estimation is that by fiscal year 15, we should see about a $1.5 million reduction to this number. So if you look at these numbers here, it doesn't reflect that change. The other thing it doesn't reflect the pickup that you give for the employee contributions. And I think that's about $3 million a year. So why would one consider changes at this time? If you look at the years of negative investment, the 2000s have been a very bad year, a very bad decade. And not only do we have the number of years with poor performance, if you look at the drop are extremely steep compared. I think we look at the only other previously comparable period would be the 1970s. So that's about 30 years ago. So one can argue that this is not a ordinary phenomenon that occurs once in a hopefully a lifetime, and therefore it might merit special treatment for the losses that has been accumulated in the last 2 or 3 years. To discuss the specifics about the recommendations, I will have to go through some very specific definition. And I think we use terms like smoothing, spreading, and all those things, basically saying that, well, we delay the recognition of specific investment gains and losses. But in this case, there's 3 specific terms: smoothing, corridor, and amortizations. Right? All of them act to delay the recognition. So basically, pay later rather than paying now. Instead of using, quote, the true market value asset, and we look at the title of this presentation, I said asset methodology, and one can wonder, well, what methodologies need to calculate value? The market value is a true value of what the assets are. But for the actual valuation, in order to provide this spreading out or delay recognition, actuaries use an artificial value called the actual value of assets. And the actual value assets incorporate these methods, these techniques that I described here, to achieve the goal of delaying recognition of gains and losses. Smoothing, we refer to the number of future years over which the gains and losses of a single year will be recognized. So, for example, if we have a loss of $40 million, in market value in this year, instead of just picking up that $4 million in this year, the actual value serves to spread it out, say, over 4 years. So we recognize $10 million this year, $10 million next year, and so on and so forth. Over the next 4 years, you bring in that total $4 million. But that serves to delay the recognition. The corridor is a sort of reality check on the actual value. Typically, there's a corridor that's set for the actual value so that it is not less than 80%, nor more than 120% of the true market value. Otherwise, you get beyond it. You're saying, well, why bother at market value? You just make up your numbers. The third part is the amortization, which is the process of paying for the gains that were recognized in 1 year. So if we have a $10 million, of the $4 million, we recognize 10, then we pay that $10 million over a 30-year period, and that's called the amortization period. The Sear's current approach is smooth over 4 years, apply a corridor of 80 to 120%, and amortization over 15 years. Here's an illustration of a delayed recognition. So if we look at the green line on this chart, this is a expected rate of return. For example, in the Sear's expected rate of return is 7.75%. And in reality, it never works like this, of course. So you can the purple line is just the real rate of return, and it goes up and it goes down. The impact of this real rate of return that deviates from the 7.75% is this. If you look at the red line. The red line is recognizing the gains and losses immediately, meaning that if you have $40 million loss, well, you put in $40 million more next time. And so on. If you have a $20 million gain, well, you reduce your contribution by $20 million that following year. So you can see the red line is extremely jagged and extremely unstable. The blue line is this process of delaying recognition, and it obviously shows, because I made that line up, it shows a much smaller progression. It's good to be king, you know. Okay, so let's look at the example of a smoothing, which is the one that SIRS applies. So we start with, I hope you bear this thing for a minute, a lot of numbers here, but the idea is shows a process, how this is done. So if we start at $250 million, and let's say this is the same market and actual values are the same at the beginning of the year, we expect 7.75% return, so that's $19.4 million on $250 million. So the expected actual value at the end of the year will be 269.4. All right, so that's the same no matter what the actual rate of return is. The actual rate of return in the first column is 15%, so we would have $287.5 million at the end of the year, right? On the second column, because we have a 40% loss, instead we only have $150 million, right? So we calculate the difference between the end of year market value and the expected actual value, and we come up with that gains and losses, right? So that number is then spread over 4 years. So we recognize 1/4 of the difference. So 1/4 of 18.1 is 4.5, and 1/4 of 119.4 is $30 million, right? Then we add that difference to the expected actual value above. So 4.5 plus 269.4 give us the 273.9, and the 269.4 minus 30 give us 239.4. But of course, we look at 239.4, well, the real value, the real market value is 150. So the ratio between the actual value using this smoothing approach is more than 160% of the underlying market value, right? So if we apply in the a 120% corridor, meaning that instead of allowing the actual value to reach the 160% of the market value, we limit that and we say, well, we only use 120%. The amount of the loss that we have to recognize in year one would be $89 million instead of $30 million. Right, so that's a huge difference. Okay, so what did the Chiron propose in terms of alternatives? There are basically 4 elements: increase in smoothing period from 4 to 10 years, raise the corridor above 120%, it will go to 130 or possibly beyond, increase amortization period from 15 years to 30 years, and then the last thing is permitting what is called negative amortization. And they presented 24 alternatives, which is an exhaustive combination of all 4